What's going on, everyone? Fearless Football Forecast here with episode 8. It is the end of our series that we've been doing where we're breaking down all the divisions in the NFL. And today we're going to be covering both the AFC and NFC North. I have a feeling that this episode is going to be great. We're both really fired up. Tomorrow is our home league fantasy football draft. So we got excitement all around. And as we always do, we're going to get into the news before we end up getting into our main segments. I think you can announce the first part of the news today.
Yeah, this one saddens me a little bit. Our boy, I've been talking about him since we started the podcast, Jordan Addison. I think he's going to be a really impactful fantasy player, really impactful for the Vikings. He's got a concussion. I'm not really too concerned about this. Really, the only concern for me, in concussion protocol with light symptoms, the only thing that really concerns me with it is you got to hope that it's not like a lingering issue because, sometimes you get one, they start to pile up, and Addison is a smaller guy. But, the way I feel about it is he'll be back by the start of the season. No need for him to play in any of the preseason games here on out, and I'm just going to fire him up as I usually would.
Yeah, what I don't understand is I saw initially in the report they were saying he's expected to come back to training on Monday. I'm like, dude, keep that man away from the field for at least a week. There's no reason to risk the injury or the re-injury in that case, especially because then he could be out for a significant amount of time. Like you said, I expect him to be back for the season. I just traded for him in one of my big fantasy leagues, so I'm really hoping that he is back. And then the next two are, pretty big signings in the grand scheme of things. I honestly think that I'm going to start talking about the Dalvin Cook one first because I think it has less overall significance as far as the player goes, but better for the team. Dalvin Cook has now signed with the Jets, which, is crazy considering they just brought Breece Hall back off the pup. It's kind of weird. It's like the second that Cook signed, Hall was like, okay, I'm ready to play. I'm able to go. Did you see he was reactivated?
Yeah, like 2 hours later after they came out that he was signing, I did see that. This is one of those things where, like you said, for the team, it's amazing. I mean, they're in a position to where they're going to be able to compete for a Super Bowl. We were just talking about them on the last episode, and I said, I think that they're going to be competing for that number one seed. So, for the team, I think it's great. Overall, like fantasy impact, player impact, Dalvin Cook, I think will be fine. I think it's going to be more of Dalvin Cook is the lead guy. I think it's going to be an A-B situation all year, but I feel like it's going to be Dalvin can be the A for the first 8 to 10 weeks of the season until Breece Hall is fully healthy, fully comfortable, ready to do everything that he, that to his maximum potential. And then for that back half of the year down the stretch where they're playing in these games to fight for their playoff spot, fight for the division, I think Breece Hall is going to take over in that number one role. It's happened pretty recently, so it sucks. We're not really going to be able to see the impact of like fantasy draft ADPs. For me personally, I still think fantasy-wise, it's worth it to take a shot on Breece Hall because I think that he's one of those guys who you saw it last year, minimal amount of touches, still found a way to produce. So I think that he'll be good enough to get you through weeks as an RB2 for the first half of the season. And then that back half of the year, he has, top 5 RB overall for the second half stretch of the year to help you win fantasy leagues.
Yeah, I'm going to probably stay clear from both of these guys just because of the amount of work and the draft capital. The draft capital is really the thing. I see I actually did look today at their ADPs. Right now, across different platforms, it looks like Breece is around the 21 overall running back, and then Dalvin Cook is in ranging from 25 to 30, which in my opinion is you're paying way too high for Cook. I wouldn't touch Cook, to be honest. But yeah, at that spot at 20, it's definitely worth taking a look at Breece Hall. The main reason why I wanted to save the next one, which is Ezekiel Elliott signing with the Patriots, is and maybe it's just I'm a fan, right? But at the same time, I've been thinking about it, and I would rather take Zeke in round 13 for the same value that I think Cook is going to produce, and you're going to have to get Cook in like round 5. There's not a chance in hell I'm drafting Dalvin Cook in round 5 in my fantasy league. That's just not going to happen. But Zeke might actually be worth it. He's already there was a report today that he's already getting the carries inside the red zone. As you know, Belichick is always that guy where he always analyzes his team. I think he saw the turnovers in the preseason game from the rookie running backs and realized that they're just not going to cut it. And that's why he ended up signing a veteran like Zeke. And also, Ramondre Stevenson's an incredible athlete, but he can really be used as a change of pace back, where I wouldn't be shocked if Zeke's the guy, in between the tackles and close yardage scenarios at the goal line, which might lead to some solid production. I mean, I'm going to be targeting him just as a late bench piece that can be plugged in as a flex, honestly. I think that Zeke has pretty good upside for where he's being drafted.
Yeah, so firstly with the team, we both think that the Patriots are just in a tough spot. The offense, even with the addition of Zeke, still isn't going to be all that dynamic. And they have, tough division in the AFC. So I think it'll make their offense better for sure. I don't think it's going to vault them into a position where now they're in consideration for winning the division. I think it's going to make them – you and I have had a slight disagreement in this to where you think that they're going to be, pretty bad, where I think that they're going to be competitive week in, week out, and, just squeak out a couple of wins on the margin here and there. I think this helps with that. Like you said, I think Zeke's going to be 100% the goal line back. Even though Ramondre is a bigger running back, for some reason he was inefficient at the goal line last season. And Zeke is one of those guys who, listen, he's not in his prime anymore, obviously, but even last year, first off, he was playing hurt, which he's done for multiple years for the Cowboys. But also, he will always fight for that extra yard. He doesn't always get it, but he gives A+ effort to get it. And I think Belichick's really going to like that. So I agree. I think he will be the goal line guy. I think he is going to be those big, the high leverage third down, rush, like 3rd and 2. If they're going to run the ball, I think he's going to be out there type stuff. And like you said, I think Ramondre is going to be, he's going to be fresher, so he'll probably be more efficient. Fantasy-wise, I didn't like Ramondre. He was really getting steamed up. And I don't think this is really going to affect him fantasy-wise. But I'm still going to stay away from Ramondre. I'm just not in on him. I know he had a great year last year. I think it was kind of a fluke. I think this is going to be more of a distributed touch, because they even have, like you said, the younger guys, Pierre Strong, Kevin Harris. We'll see who all makes the roster. But I just don't see Ramondre Stevenson being out there for every passing down situation. I just don't see that. And like you said, Zeke, while I don't think he's going to be necessarily a weekly fantasy contributor, he's going to get like 15 touches a week. And he's going to be great, like you said, where he's going to end up going. I think in home leagues, he'll probably go a little earlier because he's such a well-recognized name. Like our league, I'm sure he'll go in like the 8th round and we have keepers, but he's going to go a little earlier. But there are going to be weeks where they have an easy matchup, and you're like, yeah, let me throw Zeke in my flex because he would have 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's just worth it just based on the draft capital. I mean, even in the 8th, which in our league would be 8th, so in regular leagues 10th, you're still getting them around guys like Devin Singletary, who, yes, might get more yards, might get more touches, but with Zeke, that touchdown upside. I mean, there were 9 straight weeks last year that Zeke scored a touchdown, and that was in a bad season, in terms of his competition. So
the real question is, are you going to get his Patriots jersey? Big Zeke fan, big Pats guy.
That's not going to happen. The Pats have now been overtaken by the Jags. So we're going to start with the NFC North today. Going to kick it off with a team that I think a lot of people are down on for not many reasons. But, the Vikings, they added Brandon Powell, Josh Oliver, Marcus Davenport, Byron Murphy, and that's about it. They drafted Jordan Addison. I like their late their later picks, Jacqueline Roy's pretty solid. I watched some of his tape, but their losses were pretty big. They basically lost like three huge players on offense in Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, and Irv Smith. Also losing Dalvin Tomlinson, Eric Kendricks, Patrick Peterson. They lost a lot of key defensive players. And just it seems like they were just so efficient last year in one-score games that if you even flipped half of those, they might not have even made the playoffs, let alone won the division. And this division's just getting better. Now with the Bears having Justin Fields, the Lions seem to really have that true identity at their core. I know you and I disagree heavily on the Packers, but still they're going to be a little bit more competitive now that they're getting some of their key defensive players back that they didn't have last year. We see the Vikings at this point as still an offensive powerhouse for fantasy football. Of course, you're still going to lock in Jefferson. The two of us are very confident in Addison. I more than you prefer, Alexander Mattison. I think he's a solid player. But just game script is going to be really interesting for this team. I feel like the Vikings have been so good but not great in the last decade. They've made the playoffs almost every year, and you really don't realize how many times they've actually made the playoffs or even won a playoff game. But every single time, they just keep coming up short. And I think that their chances really just kind of expired. I mean, losing to the Giants at the end of the wild card round last year just wasn't great for them. There were some games where they just looked like one of the worst teams in the league, getting beat by the Cowboys by 38, going down to the Colts only to come back, which was crazy. I mean, and the Colts probably just wanted a higher draft pick, and that's why they maybe blew that game. But who God knows what's going on with this team. This team is literally night and day.
Yeah, I agree. So for me, I think this team is going to be a fun and mediocre team. And what I mean by that is the defense is horrible. They lost key contributors on the defensive line, like you said, Tomlinson, Smith across from Danielle Hunter. So now it's just going to be Hunter as they can key in on him a little bit easier than they could have last year. I just think that the defense, they did bring in Brian Flores, which, he's got quality pass when it comes to defensive coordinator. I just don't think that they have the talent on that side. You think of like Harrison Smith is getting older. And like I said, I just don't think they have it in the trenches on that side. And I think that teams are going to be able to pretty much score at will against them, quite honestly. They were another one of those teams, like you said, last year, those one-score games, they went on an immaculate run. I think it was like they had like 13 one-score games in a 17-game season, and they won like 12 of them or whatever. It's just one of those things where just based off of that, it'll come back to even. So let's just say they win half of them this year. Let's just say they win 7 one-score games. I just don't see a world where, with the way the division has gotten so much better, in my opinion, I don't see a world where they're going to be able to compete, especially for a playoff spot. But I think they're going to be out of the divisional race, not early on, because I think it's going to be this division. I'm really excited to talk about this division. I think it's going to be kind of like a grudge match all season long. But really, the thing with this team, like I said, they're going to be fun because the offense is still going to be productive. The offensive line is solid, good enough, solid. And then Kirk Cousins, we all know what Kirk Cousins is. He's steady. He's not a top 5 guy, but he's not going to go out there and straight up lose you a game. And, I personally think that bringing in Addison, they lost Thielen, obviously, but I think Addison is going to come in and not Adam Thielen at his peak, but Adam Thielen last year. I think Addison is already better than that version of Adam Thielen. And like you said, game script, I think they're going to be in a lot of shootouts. I think they're going to be down a lot. I think they're going to pass a lot. That's part of the reason I'm not as in on Alexander Mattison. 1, I think he's not good at football. 2, I don't think he can handle the workload. And 3, he's not a pass catcher, in my opinion. I think that Ty Chandler, Nwangu, if he comes back, I think they'll use those running backs more in the pass catching role. So for me, like I said, games that I'll be excited to see because I think it's going to be high scoring games, and somewhere where I'm happy to go fantasy wise. I mean, preferably in a 1 quarterback league, you don't want Cousins because he's not going to win you a week. But obviously, Justin Jefferson is a stud, and Jordan Addison, like you said earlier, we're both really, really high on. I'm kind of hoping I can get him tomorrow, but we'll see.
Yeah, we shall see tomorrow. Next, the team that you really like this year, we're very split. This is a team that struggled last year with an all-time great quarterback, and now a quarterback who we've really never seen is taking the reins. They didn't do a thing in free agency. Literally, their only signing was Tarvarius Moore. Never heard of him. I wouldn't say that they did much in the offseason other than lose key players. They lost Aaron Rodgers, Alan Lazard, Robert Tonyan, Mercedes Lewis, Jerron Reed, Adrian Amos, that one hurts, and Mason Crosby. So they lost pieces on every part of the ball. I did like their draft a lot, though, but that's not going to change them for this season. That means they have a good, trajectory moving forward. Love Lucas Van Ness, love Musgrave, love Jaden Reed, love Tucker Kraft. Colby Wooden was good. Sean Clifford, obviously, we're Penn State guys. We like him. They had – I can't really even speak to this team. Not that I don't know. I mean, yeah, actually, no, I don't know anything about them because I haven't paid attention because I've just assumed that they're going to be so bad. Because if they weren't good with Rodgers, how the hell are they going to be good with Jordan Love? And in reality, yeah, they are getting Jair Alexander back. That's really the only thing that I can say is going to be positive for this team. I don't know. I mean, I just think it's going to be all down to Jordan Love, who I don't think's that solid. I think he plays like a quarterback. I mean, at least in the first season, preseason game, he was doing a lot of just like slashing passes. He plays like a quarterback that should be playing in like a defensive coach's system as opposed to someone like Matt LaFleur.
Yeah, so the way I feel about this team and the reason I'm in on them, and part of the reason I was so excited to talk about this division is because I really do the three teams other than the Vikings I'm actually in on. I think they're all going to be better than last season. So it's like if they're all better, how does it work out record-wise, win-losses? But my thing with the Packers is I think that Aaron Rodgers, he had a couple injuries. I think it was his toe and his thumb or whatever. But I think he just checked out. I think he was just done, quite honestly. And Bakhtiari was out pretty much the entire season. The Packers, they have a good offensive line. They have Matt LaFleur, who, like you said, I tend to agree is a good offensive-minded coach. I think he'll be able to, put Love in a place to where he'll be able to make plays. I think they're all going to be extremely motivated. LaFleur knows that everyone thinks the reason you've had the success your first few years is because of Rodgers, which, he's had a Hall of Fame quarterback, so obviously your job's a little easier. Jordan Love, he's been sitting behind Rodgers for these past 3 seasons. Really, you just have to hope, and I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to believe that he's actually tried to learn a few things, watch the game, see what's going on, talk to these coaches, and become a better player. And I think that obviously Lazard leaving hurts, but I think that the receiving core is going to be better than it was last year. Christian Watson, I liked Christian Watson coming out of the draft. Last year he showed that if he gets the opportunity, he can do it. He's a good deep threat, solid route runner. I think he's more of a physical receiver. But they also have Dubs coming back for that second season. Jaden Reed out of Michigan State, who I like. Luke Musgrave is an extremely athletic tight end. They took the other tight end that's really technically sound, Tucker Kraft from South Dakota State. So I think that while they don't have a star, they have like the best of assembly of weapons. Like this guy does this guy does this guy does this that they've had in a while. And that's leaving out Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, their lightning and thunder. Obviously, A.J. Dillon is going to be able to pound the rock. And Aaron Jones, you give him his 10 carries and 6 targets a game. And I just think that the offense is going to be able to dink and duck its way down the field, take a couple of shots here and there to Watson or Musgrave down the seam. And I think that also I'm just going to believe in their defense. They have so much, like what was one of the first things, obviously drafting Jordan Love pissed him off. But one of the other things that pissed Rodgers off allegedly, is they would never get him help. They last year they finally drafted Watson in the second round. That was the earliest they drafted a receiver in God knows how long. Well, where have these top end picks been going? To the defense. Last year they took the two Georgia guys, Walker and Wyatt. I think that they didn't really adjust to the NFL all that well in that first year. They showed the flashes. I think that they're both going to take large step forward. Alexander is one of the true lockdown corners, as lockdown as it gets in the NFL. I think he's extremely talented. So to me, the reason I like this team, I think that the defense is going to be better. They're going to be able to actually help the offense. And I think that LaFleur knows one of the things with LaFleur is he knows he doesn't have Rodgers. He's gonna call the offense is gonna look a little different. I think AJ Dillon is gonna get more carries. I think they're gonna run the ball a lot more, set up the play action game, and I just think that the offense is gonna be not great by any means, but good enough to where they're gonna be competitive year out.
Yeah, I think we agree on a lot of teams this year, and this is the main one that we don't. I think if you had to say that there's a team that we really don't, because at the end of the day, yes, there have been improvements and there are good players, but they're still young. And this is a division that now is starting to mature. The Lions have their identity as a team. Justin Fields is now really coming into his own, and they got him help. They're reestablishing the run game. They're not going to make him, be the guy. And then the Vikings are the Vikings. They're pretty consistent. Whereas the Packers, yes, they do have two rookie tight ends, but rookie tight ends are still, at the end of the day, rookie tight ends that are probably going to get beat up a lot in the league their first year. Christian Watson and Dobbs, yeah, they're coming in their sophomore season, but they had Rodgers their freshman year to get it acclimated, and they did pretty well. I'm a fan of Dobbs. I think he's really talented. Not that big on Watson, but he's still probably their best receiver. And then the two draft picks from last year, it's still their sophomore year. So I think, and I did like their draft this year. So I think future outlook is good. But as far as the 2023 season goes, I would say that there's not a chance in hell that they win this division. They might make the playoffs because maybe the last 5 weeks they go on a 5-0 streak, but I just don't see a world where they're even decent in this. I think they're bottom guaranteed in this division unless someone really, really fucks up.
You think they're the last team in the division?
Easily. I don't even think that's a question.
Want to bet a beer on it?
Yeah.
All right, we'll bet a beer on it. Packers versus the field.
Well, yeah, I think your Vegas has the Bears last, which is crazy in my opinion. But and up next, we have a team that, like I just said, has truly really found their identity. I love the coach. Dan Campbell is the man. And they went out in their offseason this year and just got some ballers. They got some consistent players in David Montgomery, Marvin Jones. Then they took some outstanding talents in Emmanuel Mosley and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, which was really their biggest signing. Then they just went, we're going to get athletes. So they get Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round. Jack Campbell, who I think is going to be a fantastic linebacker, probably the second or third best defensive player in this year's draft class, but because he's a linebacker, he slipped. Sam Laporta, who's one of the most athletic tight ends. I didn't like Brian Branch. How the hell did he fall that far? Incredible safety. Hendon Hooker as a solid backup. Broderick Martin, even a solid late round pick. Their losses all were players that really just didn't, fit in their mold anymore, and they were able to replace them. They got rid of Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift, Justin Jackson, DJ Chark. Their biggest loss was Jeff Okudah. But obviously they addressed that by bringing in Chauncey. This team, I'm really excited for this team. And if it wasn't for my money being on the Bears, I would be much more excited about the Lions because I truly do think that the Lions are going to be the winner of this division. They play with such an intensity that they can kind of be like a ghetto version of the 49ers, where when you play the Niners, the next week you're still barely putting up numbers because you're so beat up. And that's how I feel like the Lions are. They're just going to knock you down up front. And now they have the flashy pieces in the secondary now with Gardner, and now on the perimeter having Amon-Ra, and now they have Jahmyr Gibbs. They have Laporta. They just have so many explosive players, and then they still keep true to their identity with more grinders like a David Montgomery type. I just really like what this team is doing. I think that they've truly found their identity. They screwed the Packers last year out of their chance of making it in the playoffs. Remember that game?
I do remember that very much.
I think at the end of the day, if the Vikings don't tank as much as we think, it's going to be closer between those two teams. But we do think that the Vikings are going to tank. So I like the Lions a lot this year.
Yeah, I really can't disagree with anything you said. That's one of the reasons I was so excited to talk about this division. The Lions really are set up. A lot of people were in on the Lions last year, thinking that maybe they could sneak away with a playoff spot, and they nearly did. They're so good up front, offensive line, defensive line. And like you said, they added positions that they needed. Brian Branch, Gardner Johnson really helping to lock down the secondary, because their corners aren't the best. So you get those two safeties that are going to be able to not only help in coverage, but they can both do everything. They're both fine in the run game as well. Campbell, as you said, they were one of the worst run defenses in the league. He's going to have a ton of tackles this season. I think he's going to have a very good rookie season. And then they have one of the best offensive lines in the league. Jared Goff is one of those quarterbacks where, again, he doesn't jump off the page to you, but he can be as good as the things around him. And I agree. I think the things around him are really good. Montgomery is like sneaky good in the passing game, but where he's really great is, like you said, he's that pounder. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, is going to be significant out of the backfield this season. It's going to be very nice to have a guy that you can check down to. And not only check down to, linebackers are going to have to be on their toes, whether he looks like he's going out in the flat and then he busts it up the seam and things like that.
He's already been.
You and I, in training camp? Yeah, he's looked really good. You and I are both really big Amon-Ra fans. He did tweak his ankle. They said he's just going to miss a few days. But, he's so technically sound. He runs such crisp routes. He knows where to be, when to be. He reads a coverage so well. My main concern, honestly, with this team, obviously Hutchinson, I think, is a great defensive end. I wouldn't say concerned. I don't think that their edge rushers past him are all that great. And then my concern after that as well is after Amon-Ra, which I love Laporta as well. I forgot to mention Laporta. I really don't love the receiver situation. You and I don't know if you're still as in on Jameson Williams as you were, but now he's going to miss the rest of training camp. Then he's going to be away from the team for 6 weeks suspended. And he's just one of those guys who it just seems like his heart's not in it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just get that vibe off him. He punched a teammate the other day at practice. And so I just think that when he comes back, no practice for 6 weeks. He can't practice in training camp. He's going to come back mid-season. And mind you, this is their really only deep threat. I mean, who is their deep threat? Marvin Jones.
He crutches his way there.
Exactly.
I mean, now that you say that, though, that's making me think more along the lines of, because I was saying, now just switching to a fantasy perspective, and I just want to know how you feel because we haven't really discussed this player at all. But Jahmyr Gibbs, I was thinking that he was going to be a big impact for the Lions, but not necessarily in fantasy just because all the touchdowns are going to be poached from David Montgomery. But if you are right about Jameson Williams, that means that he's just going to he could have a 100 reception season as a running back because he would have to be the number 2 option.
So I like Jahmyr Gibbs for fantasy. I think he's going appropriately. He's got amazing upside just because of that receiving ability. I think that he's going to be targeted targeted, not 100 receptions. I mean, there is a world, best case scenario, I could see it. He's so good in the receiving game that he's one of those guys who could hit that threshold. But I think he'll have right around 100 targets. You know what I mean? And like I was saying, I think that after Amon-Ra, and it's one of the things that you were saying about the young talent. I love Sam Laporta. I love Jahmyr Gibbs, but they are still rookies. And I think that they'll be good numbers-wise, but I just feel like it's one of those teams where, fourth quarter, you're playing against the Bears. You need to go 60 yards and get a touchdown. You're relying – Amon-Ra has been bullying people all game. Now they have double coverage on him. He's getting locked up. Where's Jared Goff going to go? I love Laporta. I think he's talented. I love Gibbs out of the backfield. That's what I'm saying. One thing that I do think that they're going to do in the beginning of the season, I think there's going to be a lot of 2 running back sets with Montgomery and Gibbs. But my main point is you can't really rely on anybody. And not that you should be able to – there's not many teams out there where, okay, take your number one receiver away, can we rely on you? I just think that after their number one receiver, if he somehow gets taken out of the game, which is a big if, it just changes the dynamic of the offense so much where as I was saying with the Packers, I think that they obviously don't have a receiver as good as Amon-Ra, and I don't think the offense is going to be as good as the Lions, but I think that at least they're not going to have to lean heavily on somebody when Christian Watson gets doubled up because that's not their offense.
No, exactly.
So, and it'll be a better explanation when we get to the Bears because they're more similar in that sense where I think that the Bears have a true receiver one as well. But it's just one of those things where they're my 2 main concerns. I'm a little concerned about pass rush, and I'm concerned with, receivers outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown. But, I mean, this team is, like I said, they almost made the playoffs last year. I think that they're going to definitely be competing for a playoff spot this year. Like I said, I think this division is going to be a dogfight.
Yeah. So at least with them, like they do have a lot of young players, but then they have Jared Goff too, who's a lot more experienced than Jordan Love. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the main reasons why my money is on the next team. The Bears. I don't understand what the hell Vegas is doing. They're sleeping on the money, folks. Everyone in the comments, don't listen to anything that we've said so far. Put your money on the Bears. They're plus 450 to win the division. That is absolutely psychotic. The Bears, I'll talk more about them in a minute, but I'm just going to recap what they've done. They did not lose much. Obviously, their biggest loss last year happened midseason with Roquan Smith. It's actually really shitty now looking back on it. I mean, as a Ravens fan, I'm kind of happy about it, obviously, now that he's on the Ravens. But now that the team is looking really good, they could really use Roquan Smith right now. But their offseason losses that actually happened in free agency were David Montgomery, Equinemius St. Brown, Dante Pettis, Riley Reif, Al-Quadin Muhammad, and Armon Watts. None of those players are really going to impact the team. Then looking at who they got, bringing in Philip Walker, Donta Foreman, Travis Homer, DJ Moore, big one there. Robert Tonyan, think that's going to be great using 2 really bruising tight ends with him and Kmet. Bringing in Nate Davis for guard, Rasheem Green, DeMarcus Walker, Andrew Billings, Tremaine Edmonds, which is a big one there, TJ Edwards, and then I love their draft, bringing in Darnell Wright, Gervin Dexter, Roshan Johnson, a rookie that both of us think is going to be pretty solid. The main thing, the main reason why I love the Bears, and they just showed it in their first preseason game, is that it seems like the last year they were really forcing Justin Fields to do everything. And this is one of the reasons why, as far as fantasy goes, like I'm not saying Justin Fields is going to replicate what he did last year. I think he's going to be more consistent and better for real life. Because if you look at it, the Bears last year were last in yards after the catch. And do you know what team was first in that statistic?
What team?
It was the Chiefs. So you take a look at it, and if Andy Reid isn't trusting Mahomes to make 25 amazing plays a game. Why are the Bears trusting Justin Fields to do that? Now they bring in DJ Moore, one of the most consistent receivers in the league. Great body, amazing body guy you're wearing. His body control is amazing. His route running is great. His hands are great. Really, the fact that they, moved, down in the draft and got a receiver out of it's pretty great too. Getting some extra picks and got a really talented player. Like I said, I think the 2 tight ends are just really going to help out. Kind of what you said about the Packers, where they have different guys that can all do different things. I think the Bears offense now has that. Still having Darnell Mooney, who's really been the true one for Fields the last couple of years. Now he can be used underneath a lot more in his true role, which I think is going to be much better for him. And then Fields, obviously, the run game is going to be there. Khalil Herbert obviously showed that he has burst, and Roschon Johnson's a bruiser. So I really like what they have on offense. Their defense is going to be a little bit of a question mark, but it's really, for their defense, it's really their secondary that's just non-existent. And in this division where there's not much talent other than the Vikings on offense, I don't see that being a problem in the interdivisional games. You know what I mean? Shitty corners can guard the secondary Lions receivers, or can guard Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs with Jordan Love throwing, the ball in the stands every game. But I really just see this Bears team being, just very conservative, but being very efficient.
Yeah, so the Bears, obviously, as you said, I'm repping DJ Moore. He's one of my favorite players in the league. I think that he's been a little overshadowed because he's always had a terrible quarterback every single year he's been in the league. Maybe his rookie year when he had Cam, you could argue that he probably wasn't terrible at that point, but after his rookie year, Cam was. I think that one of the things that to me is most pivotal about this team is that connection. I think DJ Moore is a true number 1 receiver, and I think it changes the dynamic of the offense completely. You have DJ Moore to operate as the number 1. He's done different things every year. He's been a deep target. He's been, your underneath guy. He's great intermediate routes. He's a good route runner, extremely athletic. But that opens up, like you said, they have the dual-headed tight end attack with Kmet and Tunyon, who, neither one is like a star tight end, but they're both solid receiving options. And then Darnell Mooney, who, again, as you mentioned, has been operating as Justin Fields' number 1 receiver when he's been on the field. Obviously, Mooney got hurt last year, which that's not what he is. He's a number 2 stretch the field kind of guy. And then honestly, I know Chase Claypool has been, a lot of people have crapped on him, and I agree. I'm not the biggest fan of Chase Claypool, but I think in this offense, it's not like he's going to be someone who's heavily relied upon. So, but he's a big body and he's extremely athletic. So there are going to be times where he'll show up and make plays here and there. And as you said, the run game, I think, is going to be really good. Having a running quarterback like Justin Fields, you see it with the Ravens every year. It just helps your run game so much more, not only when the quarterback is running, but it just helps open the lanes up for the running backs because every linebacker is a half second slower. They're keeping their eye on the quarterback for that extra half second. Herbert is a guy who, I'm a Roschon Johnson stan, so I think that he's going to win the job. But quite honestly, if I'm being honest, they have 3 good running backs. Khalil Herbert, you saw in the preseason game, the other day, he's a solid receiver and he's solid with the ball in his hands as a runner as well. I think Roschon is going to make an impact this season. Donta Foreman is a big bruiser. So I think this is going to be one of those teams where they really try and slow the game down, make sure that opposing defenses are tired because the amount of time they're on the field, keep the ball away from other offenses. But at the same time, they're going to have the option to actually pass this season instead of, they could pass last season, but their pass was a 60-yard scramble from Justin Fields. The big question with this team is the defense. As you said, the secondary, the D-line isn't great either. So that's really the concern there, which obviously D-line and your secondary, if they're shaky, you have a problem. So it's funny because they went out and they signed Tremaine Edmonds, they signed TJ Edwards, who are both good players, but they're at the linebacker position, so you're kind of like, what are you doing? The big question for me is, what's that?
I mean, after getting rid of Roquan Smith, they kind of needed to add some linebackers.
Well, yeah, they needed to add linebackers, but if you had to pick position by position, where would linebacker rank on the importance of positions? It'd be right towards the bottom. You know what I mean? But I think that they're going to be solid in the run game. They're both good in coverage as well. So that underneath stuff, I think they'll be all right with. The big question to me is, I don't think the D line is going to take any like magical step to where their defensive line is fantastic. I think that their secondary could take a step to where they're not like the Legion of Boom or anything by any means, but I'm a big Jaquan Brisker guy. I think that adding that experience, another year under his belt, I think that he is truly one of the better safeties in the league, especially like single high situation coverage. He's great. And then the real question is those younger corners taking a step forward. Kyler Gordon from last year, he was injured. He's made a couple plays here and there in camp. Can he actually become a consistent contributor? And then the rookie that they got, who one of the things that I love about him, and again, this isn't the most important thing when you're a corner, but he is not afraid to get dirty. Tyreek Stevenson from Miami. He is great against the run. I think he's going to be a solid rusher from the cornerback position, which is something not a lot of defenses have. And I think that, in college, he had a lot of pass deflections. He does have an eye for the ball. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing with them is, are those younger cornerbacks actually going to take that step and be productive? But I think that they're going to be a very fun team to watch. I'm really excited for Justin Fields to see. To me, this is make or break for him. They're in a great position moving forward. But to me, if Justin Fields can't be solid this year, like can't be a good quarterback, I think that's an indictment on him. I think he's got the weapons. They added Darnell Wright, who I think is going to come in and be, maybe beginning of the season not great because he's a rookie, but I think he is by the end of the year going to be a good offensive tackle in the NFL. So I think the offensive line is going to be better in general. So yeah, I think that it really all comes down to Justin Fields to me and the corners. I'm really, really excited to see. Like I said, I'm very excited about this division. I can make a case for every single one of these teams to come first or last, quite honestly.
Well, now it's time to rank them. So
yeah.
I guess I'll go first since you might need a second. I'm going to go – I have Bears written down, but that's just my bet. I'm going to go Lions, Bears, Vikings, Packers. I think that the Bears and Lions both make the playoffs regardless of who wins the division because I think they'll both be around 9 or 10 wins.
All right. So this is, like I said, one of those divisions. I can't wait until next video when we do the actual predictions. We run through the schedule. But just off the top of my head, what I'm going to go with, it's tough for me. I'm going to go Lions, Packers, Bears, Vikings is what I'm going to go with. Because I do think that the Lions are just so dominant in the trenches.
And next up, we have a division that we've already talked about to an extent. We went on and on about the NFC North, which I'm sure we probably weren't thinking we were going to do, but I think it's good to get it out there since we haven't really talked about any of those
divisions, man.
Yeah. But
that's like the biggest question mark for me is that division.
Oh yeah. And if you go back, I'll include links to the episodes where we talk more about the AFC North. Now we only have like 15, 20 minutes left to record. So we're going to kind of breeze through these divisions. We've talked ad nauseum about the Browns, Steelers, Bengals, and Ravens throughout all of our other episodes. But we're going to talk a little bit more about them right now, kind of just run through. Starting with the Bengals, added Orlando Brown and Sidney Jones, drafted Miles Murphy, lost Samaje Perine, Hayden Hurst, Eli Apple, Jesse Bates, Von Bell, and Trey Flowers. I don't think that it is disputable that this team is not a playoff team, not one of the top 5 or 6 best teams in the league. Probably a Super Bowl contender this year, as long as Joe Burrow can stay healthy. I don't see a world where this team doesn't make it pretty far in the playoffs, especially if Burrow stays healthy all year. In our Fantasy My Guys video, if you want to go hear me talk about how much I really like Joe Mixon this season, you can go check that out. I think this year, really Burrow has his best chance probably for MVP, as long as he's back at a reasonable time. This team is going to be really freaking good. They didn't really lose anyone defensively either.
Yeah, so as you said, we talked about this entire division, and I think it's another division that is going to be just complete and utter mayhem. I think every team is good in this division, which is obviously scary because, there's never any rest. You look at divisions like the AFC South and you're like, how did the Jags get stuck with those 3 scrubs? And then there's a division like the AFC North. But yeah, I mean, it comes down to Joe Burrow's health. He's already got that calf strain. They're saying he should be back week 1. I think that they're going to be, the same old team. I just think that their division rivals are going to be a little bit tougher and kind of be able to take a little bit more advantage of spots than they have in previous years.
And one of those being the Baltimore Ravens really just revamped their entire offense, bringing in a new coordinator, adding Odell Beckham Jr., Nelson Aguilar, Laquan Treadwell, drafting Zay Flowers. Also, I really like their one defensive pickup this year, Rock Ya-Sin, pretty consistent player. They had a lot of losses, but none that really will affect them. Other than that, they have 2 older players, meaning Jason Pierre-Paul and Calais Campbell, that I think are really big losses. But other than that, they just had Kenyon Drake, Campbell's, and Josh Oliver, and Jawan James. And Campbell's incredible. I love Campbell. But he's also very good at this point. Huh? Yeah, he's on the Falcons. Yeah, he is now. But no, I said they lost him.
Oh, okay.
They
have old players.
No. I'm saying they lost the 2 older guys, so it's not really going to impact them that well. Obviously, the news that you just brought up before we started recording the show might be bad, but didn't you say he's not going to?
Yeah, so there's technically 2 pieces of news. One, the bigger piece of news is Marlon Humphrey's dealing with a foot injury. They're saying that he's going to miss at least a month. To me, foot injuries are scary. I feel like they always say, he's got some foot pain. I'll be out a month, and then all of a sudden he's out for the year. So that could obviously be scary. Marlon Humphrey is a great cornerback. But don't worry, they signed Ronald Darby, so everything's going to be okay because he's a lockdown corner.
I mean, he's not horrendous. That's not the worst signing that they probably could have done. But anyway, back to the Ravens. I'm expecting an MVP season from Lamar Jackson. I have money on it. I think if this offense is half as good as people are projecting, it'll still be one of the top 3 offenses in the league as far as how it operates. Lamar Jackson in his MVP season didn't have this amount of talent around him. And, just thinking that he has pretty much the entire field now. You have Rashad Bateman, who really is your quintessential X receiver. You have Zay Flowers, who can do so much underneath. And Odell is just such a question mark. He can, if Odell is healthy and playing the way that he played that last stretch of games with the Rams, there's really no ceiling for what this roster can do and this offense can do with one of the best tight ends, probably the second best tight end in the NFL, and Mark Andrews as well. You have J.K. Dobbins back there. You have just Lamar's – we haven't even mentioned Lamar's rushing ability. The defense, it's the Ravens. They've never had a bad defense. Their defense is always solid. And last season, really, they were falling apart when they brought in Roquan Smith. And I'm a huge believer that Roquan Smith is one of the top 10 defensive players in the NFL. I think he's going to be outstanding this season for the Ravens. Now that their momentum's coming in, they're going to be coming in hot. Obviously, we hope that Marlon Humphrey is healthy. That's going to be a huge factor. But last year they were playing without him and Marcus Peters for a significant amount of time too, because he was injured last year. And they were, very exposed. So it's really important that he does come back.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, they're going to be right up there to be able to compete in the division. My biggest concern, quite honestly, is I think that the passing offense is going to be better. They have a better offensive coordinator to design a better scheme passing. Really, it comes down to, is Lamar going to stay healthy? He's been injured, the last like 6 weeks of the season, 2 years in a row. And it's just one of those things where, yes, it is a freak incident, but at the same time, he's a mobile quarterback. Him running around scrambling is one of the things that's leading into that.
Exactly. And I know a team next up that you're really high on, the Cleveland Browns. They had not really many losses of significance. Jacoby Brissett, Kareem Hunt, Dearness Johnson, Jadeveon Clowney, Chase Vinovich, Taven Bryan, Deion Jones, and John Johnson. But I do like who they brought in, bringing in Joshua Dobbs, Elijah Moore. That's a good one there. Jordan Akins, Colby Gossett, Wes Martin, Dalvin Tomlinson, who we already mentioned earlier. That was a great get for them. Tristan Hill, Mike Ford, Juan Thornhill. Really think that's going to be good as well. Same with Rodney McLeod. And they didn't have many high picks this year in the draft, but I think that they, drafted some solid players in Cedric Tillman, Dorian Thompson-Robinson can be a decent backup. You already got to see what he did in preseason. I'm in on this Browns team. I think Nick Chubb is going to have a fantastic year. Hopefully the workload doesn't become too much for him now that there's not really any backup running backs in that backfield. But maybe Deshaun Watson can be the backup running back. I expect Watson to be great. There's no reason to believe that he can't. He wasn't as impressive as many people wanted him to be in the last year. But at the same time, you got to realize the guy didn't play football for a year and a half and has been dealing with a lot of mental torture from this court case. So I expect him to bounce back. I mean, if you look back when Watson was first in the league, he was a top 5 quarterback, and now he's not even being talked about in the top 15. He's out to prove something, and I know you like the Browns a lot this year. I just think that they're not as good as the top 2 teams in the division, but I still think they have a chance to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I love the Browns this year. Like you said with Watson, I think that him being away from the team during that suspension, him not playing football for 2 years obviously really hurt him. I think that he is going to, even maybe if he's not as good as he was, I think he's going to be more – I think he's going to be closer to the guy he was than the guy we saw last year. I'm going to put it that way. Because last year he was really just god-awful, quite honestly. Like you said – Nick Chubb, one of the best running backs in the league, might be the best runner, pure just runner in the league. The guy's a stud. If he stays healthy, I mean, the play action game, Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, David Njoku, Tillman. I like David Bell from last year. They have guys down the depth chart that obviously aren't stars, but I think can be productive. Donovan Peoples-Jones. So I like the weapons on this team. I love the offensive and defensive line on this team. The offensive line is one of the best in the league. They have, Pro Bowlers damn near across the entire thing. And then their defensive line, they added, they added a couple guys. Ziggy Smith, I think, is going to be such an important get for them. I've said it a couple times already. Yes, Myles Garrett used to play across Jadeveon Clowney, but Jadeveon Clowney, he's one of the most annoying players in the NFL because he had all the talent in the world. We all saw it when he was coming out. I just feel like he's one of those guys who his entire career he just got by on his talent and never really put the effort into it. He's not doing the right training, things like that, to where he would get hurt, and you would just see like on the field, like I just feel like he just wouldn't care. Ziggy Smith, it was a leader on that Vikings defense last year. So I think, and he was extremely productive. So having Myles Garrett against a guy who I think is going to be a true force at the other edge rushing position, I think is going to be an extremely scary task. And then you look at the rest of the defense. I love Joker at linebacker, Denzel Ward at corner, Delpit at safety. Adding Thornhill is a guy who he's one of those undernamed guys, but he's been with the Chiefs. He makes big plays in big time situations. McLeod is a veteran. I think that the defense is going to be really, really good, and I think Watson is going to take a step forward. And if those two things happen, they're going to be one of the better teams in the NFL this year.
And finally, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who both of us really like this year. It's just a shame that they're in such a great division. I think if they were in any of the divisions of the NFC other than the NFC East, they would be up there with 1 or 2 in the division. It's just a shame that they're in this incredible division. They lost Devin Bush last year, Cameron Sutton, William Jackson, Terrell Edmonds. I ended up signing Allen Robinson, Nate Herbig, Armand Watts, Marcus Golden. That was a good one there. And Keanu Neal. Love Neal. They really are just becoming more of they're kind of returning back to what they were before they had Big Ben. You know, Kenny Pickett's the most athletic quarterback they've had in a long time, and that's not really saying much considering Kenny Pickett's not the most athletic guy. But surrounding Pickett with weapons is something that you can't say that they haven't done. I love Deontay Johnson, as do you, this year. Bringing in Allen Robinson is going to be huge. Having the tight end combination with Pat Freiermuth and now drafting Darnell Washington, who is getting great reports out of camp, and George Pickens, who could truly become a number 1 receiver in this league. Bringing in, Najee Harris wasn't healthy last season. He's going to be healthy. The defense is always so good. TJ Watt wasn't healthy for a lot of last season. He should be good to go this year. Their secondary's been great. They're just a team that's going to keep beating everyone outside their division and might not be able to stop the top 3 powerhouses of this division. But I think that they might steal some more wins this year. The thing with this division, it's kind of like how you said the last one. They're kind of very reflective of each other. It's just this one's the more higher, like the higher version of it. Whereas we expect the NFC North, a lot of it's going to be one in the trenches, but it's going to be one with 7, 8, or 9 wins. Whereas the AFC North, every team's going to have probably over 9 wins, and the top teams are going to have 13, 12, or 11 wins and actually win this division. And I don't see the Steelers being that team. But at the end of the day, would I be surprised if they were? No, but they're going to be competitive. They're the spread team this year. I think the Steelers are against the spread team of the year.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said. I love the offense this year. They've addressed offensive line. They took Broderick Jones in the first round. They signed Isaac Seumalo, who has been a great offensive guard for the Eagles for years. Never really got the name recognition. So the offensive line is going to be better. Najee Harris coming into the season actually healthy. Jalen Warren as a change of pace guy at the running back position. And like you said, the receiving core, I think, is phenomenal. Deontay Johnson, your possession guy. George Pickens, your big play guy. Just bully one-on-one. And then Freiermuth. I love Freiermuth, Penn State guy. And that's not the only reason. I think he is extremely sound. He's a good run blocker, but he's also a great receiver. And like you said, Kenny Pickett, he's not crazy athletic, but he is pretty athletic. He will be able to, on a big 3rd and 8 when everyone's locked down field, he can scramble for a first down, which is a big thing in the NFL. I mean, obviously nowadays a lot more players can do it. But I really will think Kenny Pickett, he was really good throwing balls to the outside, deeper downfield and towards the sidelines last year. When you look at efficiency metrics and things like that. So I think that he's going to take a step forward last year. You look at them last year, they were that way, and Kenny Pickett had, 12 passing touchdowns? Obviously, Trubisky played for a few games at the beginning of the year, but I think that the offense is going to take a significant step forward. And then the defense, like you said, the defense is always good. They have contributors at every single position. TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith is an extremely great pass rushing duo. Minka Fitzpatrick manning the secondary. And they have one of the best coaches in the league. I mean, Mike Tomlin, he's one of those guys who he squeezes everything out of the lemon that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. He will get the best out of every single player on this roster, and he will make sure that on the margins this team is ready to show up. And really, that's what he's done the entire time he's been there. That's why they're competitive every single year, and I think they're going to be extremely competitive this year. I think that this is going to be one of those divisions where obviously I think three playoff teams are coming out of this division. And while the Steelers have the least likelihood, I think that they definitely have a certain shot of not only getting in that conversation to get a wild card, but if they get hot at the right time, you never know. I mean, I think that they have the talent to just be a great team. Like, some teams just gel. They're not the best,
Every
but like
team
the
has
defense
the
picks you up.
puncher's chance. Every
Yeah,
team in this division has the puncher's chance. I mean, the
right.
Bengals have their consistency the last couple of years. The Ravens have Lamar as their X factor. If he can, replicate his MVP season, they have a great chance. The Browns, they have a fantastic unit and probably the best overall roster of the teams. And then the Steelers, they can win with their chemistry and just if Kenny Pickett really ends up taking some serious steps forward in year 2. Time for the official standings. I'm gonna kind of switch it up a little bit. I have Ravens 1. I have the Browns actually now at 2. I have the Bengals at 3, just because of the Burrow injury. I think that they're making less of it than what it actually is. And 4, I'm going to go with the Steelers. I'm moving the Browns up there. I think you've kind of sold me on the Browns. They have too good of a roster, and everyone just forgets that Deshaun Watson is great.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go Browns 1. I've been saying how much I love them, past couple months. And then again, I'm more torn on my 2, 3, but I'm gonna lean with the Ravens. I'm gonna go Bengals 3, Steelers 4. I was kind of down on the Bengals before, not down to where I think they'll suck. I just think that the Ravens and Browns are going to take such a step forward this year. But I mean, both of these divisions are going to be extremely fun football to watch. We're getting so close. I cannot wait.
And the last thing I'll say about the Bengals too, their defense, kind of like the Giants last year, was a little bit too efficient based on who they have back there. And at the end of the day, yes, they, in terms of their turnover rate, they were the best defense out of these 4. I think on paper, they're probably the worst out of these 4. And I think that might get more exposed this year with Burrow not being able to really dominate in the early weeks. I think their defense is going to, be kind of a little bit exposed, especially after losing Jesse Bates, who not only is a fantastic talent, but also a locker room leader. And we just want to let everyone know next week we got a spicy episode. It will probably be an hour and a half to 2 hours long. We're going to have to pick a really good day to record that because we're going to need some serious time and time in the day beforehand to research. We're going to be picking every single game of the NFL season. Don't worry, you're not going to have to be a part of that. You're going to listen to all of our record predictions, and we're going to be predicting all the awards, the DeMar Hamlin Award, the MVP Award, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year. We're going to be all over the place next week. It's going to be sick. Hope to see you there. Make sure to subscribe, smash that like button. We'll see you.